Hello students, today in this video we'll learn about pollination, kinds of pollination and agents of pollination. So the first one is, what is pollination? This pollination, the term pollination is very familiar to all of us. We know what is pollination. It is a transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. And generally there are two types of pollination, that is self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, the pollen grains gets transferred from anther to stigma of the same flower, same flower or another flower of same plant. So here in self-pollination, the transfer of pollen grains is from anther to stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant. And in cross-pollination, it is a transfer of pollen grains from the anther to stigma of different flower. So generally we have these two types of pollination. Now we shall study about the kinds of pollination. So kinds of pollination. This is categorized depending on based on this source of pollen grains. From where these pollen grains have been received. So according to that, we have three categories of pollination. That is, the first one is autogamy. In this autogamy type of pollination occurs in the same flower, same flower or like of the flowers of the same plant. And then this autogamy, it is in a normal flower, this autogamy is rather very rare, because in a normal flower you will find that the anthers and then stigmas are well exposed. So here there's a possibility that the pollen grains from some other flower will be carried and then transferred to that stigma. So in that case, autogamy will not be achieved. In that case, it will be cross-pollination, some other type of pollination. Autogamy means the pollination of the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to stigma of the same flower. So autogamy will be possible only if the flower is bisexual. That means if in a flower both the male and the female part is present, and this female and then male reproductive part has to mature at the same time. Suppose stamen matures first and then stigma is not matured yet. Then in that case, pollination will not take place. So for this autogamy to take place, the anther and then stigma has to lie close to each other, and then they have to mature at the same time. Now some flowers like oxalis, viola and commelina. So this type of flowers have these type of plants have two types of flowers. That is chasmogamous flowers and then chasmogamous and cleistogamous flower. So chasmogamous flowers are open, and here anther and stigma are well exposed. And in cleistogamous flowers, they are closed flower, and then it will just look like a bud. So in chasmogamous flowers, the anther is and then stigma is well exposed. So in this type of flowers, like autogamy is not guaranteed. Like some other type of cross-pollination may take place. Not only autogamy, not only self-pollination, but then even cross-pollination also chances there. Okay, possibility for cross pollination is here. So autogamy in this chasmogamous type of flower is not guaranteed. Whereas in cleistogamous flowers they are close. So since they are close, since they look like just like a bud, anther and then stigma, they lie close to each other, and then there's no chance, there's no possibility of any other pollen grains transferring to that stigma. So this is undoubtedly an autogamous flower. So this type of flowers, cleistogamous flowers, they ensure the seed sac, or they ensure the pollination even in the absence of pollinators. They don't need any agents like wind or some insects or animals. They don't need the help of anyone, but then in the flower itself, both the male and female reproductive part is there, and then they lie closely to each other, and pollination is carried out. Now the second type of pollination is geitonogamy. So in this type of pollination, the pollen grains will be transferred from anther to stigma. Okay, anther to stigma of different flower. Okay, different flower but same plant. So here, if you look at this type of pollination, then functionally it looks like a cross pollination, because pollen grains are being transferred from anther of another flower to stigma of another flower. So functionally it looks like a cross pollination, but then genetically they are also self pollination. Okay, self pollination, because the type of genes, they are going to carry the same character, because the genes are going to be similar, because since it is taking place inside the same plant. Now the third one is xenogamy. Now this xenogamy is purely cross pollination. It comes under cross pollination. So here the pollen grains will be transferred from one flower, okay, from one plant to different plant. Okay, so it is a transfer of pollen grains from one plant to another plant. So xenogamy is totally a cross pollination. This xenogamy gives rise to genetical variations, because two different types of flowers are going to combine, and then all their genetical characters are going to fuse, and then they will give rise to variations. Now next one is agents of pollination. Okay, there are two types of agents of pollination, that is biotic and abiotic. So under biotic agents there will be animals, okay, including insects, bats and birds. So these are the pollinating agents. And under abiotic comes the wind and water. So pollination by these abiotic agents are not guaranteed again. This is just a factor of chance, like it may or may not help in this pollination. So that is the reason why enormous amount of pollen grains are produced. Okay, just to avoid these chances of this pollination not being achieved, enormous number or large number of pollen grains are produced, and then it is much more as compared to this the number of ovules produced. Okay, now among the abiotic agents of pollination, wind is the most common agent of pollination, and pollination by wind is called anemophily. Okay, so pollination which is helped by this wind is called anemophily. Now for wind pollinated flowers, the pollen grains, okay, pollen grains should be light and non-sticky. Okay, so this type of flowers will have these lightweight pollen grains and then non-sticky pollen grains. And then the stamens of these wind pollinated flowers will remain well exposed, and then Okay, stamens are well exposed, and stigmas. Stigmas are broad and feathery. So this will help in trapping the pollen grains. So these are some of the adaptations or modifications in wind pollinated flowers. You will find that the pollen grains are light and non-sticky, and then even the stamens are well exposed, and the stigma will be broad and feathery in order to trap the pollen grains. Now, for example, let us take the example of this corn cob. Now, the golden hairy thing that you see in the corn is nothing but is a style and stigma, which floats in the wind in order to trap the pollen grains. And this wind pollination, that is anemophily, pollination by wind, is much common in the grasses. Now, second agent of pollination is water, and then pollination by water is called hydrophily. This pollination by water is not very common in the higher plants. Only about 30 genera, that is also mostly monocots, exhibit this hydrophily or pollination by water. But in lower plants like algae and bryophytes and pteridophytes, this pollination is common, like water pollination is much more common. And even the distribution of these bryophytes and pteridophytes are limited because of the need of water for fertilization. And that is the reason why you find these bryophytes and then pteridophytes near the riverbanks or in the marshy areas. Now, examples of water pollinated flowers are Vallisneria, okay, which you will find in fresh water, and Zoostera. So this one you will find in marine water in big seas. It's also called as marine seagrass. So these are examples of water pollinated flowers. Now, not all the aquatic plants depend on water for pollination. For example, water hyacinth and water lily, okay, they have their stigmas on the surface of the water with the help of long stalk. Okay, so suppose this is the surface of water, so their stigma are like long, and then their stigma are just on the surface of the water. And even the male reproductive part also, that pollen grains are also released on the surface of water only. Okay, so pollen grains, the transfer of pollen grains in this water hyacinth and then water lily does not take place with the help of this water, but then it may be carried out by the wind currents or by the help of these animals. So in these plants, water does not help in pollination. Now, some other water pollinated flowers are like they are found submerged inside the water. You will find these flowers. So these flowers, they will, even the male and the female parts, reproductive parts, they are going to produce their male gametes and female gametes inside the water, and then along with the water currents, they are like they come in contact and then fuse, and then that is how pollination takes place in of submerged plants. And pollen grains of these submerged plants are long, ribbon-like, and then they are protected against wetting, okay, against wetting with the help of this mucilaginous covering. Now, both these wind and then water pollinated flowers they are not brightly colored, and then they also do not produce any nectar. Now, let us see the third agent of pollination, that is animals. So the third agents of this pollination is animals. So animals like bees, butterflies, flies, beetles, wasps, ants, and all these animals, they are like the agents of pollination. Among all these animals, pollination is mostly like carried out by these insects. That means the insects are the most dominating like agents of pollination. Even the larger animals like primates, that is lemurs. Primates means mammals. Okay, so mammals like lemurs and arboreal rodents. Arboreal rodents means like the rodents, the animals which live in the tree tops or in the branches of trees. And even these reptiles also act as pollinators. Flowers pollinated by these animals, they have some few modifications, like most of the flowers are brightly colored. They are brightly colored and produce nectar. Okay, they produce a lot of nectar. And even if the small size flowers, okay, if the flower is small, then they are found in clusters, in a group, just to make it visible and then clear and to attract the animals for pollination. And some flowers pollinated by these beetles and flies. Okay, if the particular flower is this pollinated by beetles and flies, then what is the adaptation that they have? They produce a foul smell, and then these animals will be attracted to this foul smell, and then they will help in this pollination. These flowers offer some rewards in return to these animals for pollination. These animals help the flowers in pollination, and in return they offer some rewards like pollen grains and then nectar. And even some plants, like some large plants like Amorphophallus, which is 6 feet high, they used to offer a safe place to lay the eggs. And then when the insects come and then lay eggs, during that time they help in the pollination. They will be dusted by this nectar, and then they will dust there. So they're going to transfer the pollen grains there. So during the transfer, this insect also lays egg in that plant, and then this from the eggs, larva will come out, and then in the meantime, even the pollination will also be carried out. So they are helping each other. Plants offer these rewards like pollen grains, nectar, and even the safe place for laying eggs to the animals. And we know that animals are helping the plants in carrying out the pollination. So this is all about pollination. What is pollination, and these kinds of pollination and ages of pollination.